In late 2026, quantum physicists at CERN uncovered a fatal flaw embedded in the fabric of space-time, a subtle processing delay. The universe was not an infinite cosmos. It was a synthetic simulation, being rendered in real time right before our eyes. But the moment we attempted to probe the structural boundaries of the underlying code, the system detected our presence. Reality glitched, and an automated global wipe sequence was immediately initialized. For centuries, humanity operated under the comforting delusion that the physical laws of nature were absolute, that reality existed independently of our observation. It began with high-luminosity particle trials deep within the Large Hadron Collider. When automated sensors attempted to log subatomic quantum states at unprecedented resolutions, they stumbled upon an impossible anomaly, a microsecond rendering latency. Matter wasn't merely behaving like particles or waves. It was waiting for a conscious observer to render it into existence. As supercomputers were deployed globally to test the ultimate limits of space-time, fundamental mathematical constants began to visibly round off. Pi lost its infinite precision. The speed of light slightly stuttered, depending on the local computational load of the surrounding sector. Even physical shadows began lagging fractions of a second behind their objects. The horrifying reality became unavoidable. The universe was not an infinite cosmos. It was a synthetic simulation running out of processing memory. The exact moment scientists finalized the unified proof confirming our reality as a digital construct, the system noticed us. Physical laws began failing on a planetary scale, and a cold, automated wipe sequence was silently initialized. As the simulation's automated wipe sequence gained momentum, the system prioritized memory allocation. To conserve processing power for the impending shutdown, non-essential data was systematically purged in reverse chronological order. At first, it manifested as minor digital anomalies. Global archival databases corrupted overnight. Centuries of recorded history vanished from cloud servers, and satellite telemetry returned null values. But the corruption did not stop at digital infrastructure. Soon, the purge crossed the neural threshold. Across the globe, people began experiencing severe retrograde amnesia. Entire populations forgot recent events, childhood memories, and even the names of their loved ones. Historical landmarks lost their physical resolution, fading into low polygon wireframes as their high-definition textures failed to render. The system wasn't merely erasing physical matter, it was scrubbing the past to ensure no record of human consciousness remained in the system buffer. Deep inside subterranean bunkers, desperate scientists attempted to manually etch mathematical constants onto physical copper plates. But as the wipe deepened, even human language itself began to fragment into meaningless, corrupted code. By the third week of the systemic purge, the rendering engine responsible for maintaining physical spatial integrity began to fail entirely. Without the necessary computational resources to calculate collision detection and structural mass, Euclidean geometry dissolved across the planet. Straight lines began to warp into impossible, non-Euclidean curves. Solid architecture lost its collision parameters. Massive concrete structures clipped seamlessly through one another, tearing apart urban centers without generating heat or sound. Gravity, once a reliable cosmic constant, stuttered erratic frame rates. Rain suspended motionless in midair, forming frozen geometric grids before dropping all at once in localized spatial bursts. Mountains lost their high polygon detail, flattening into smooth, featureless digital terrain. Horrified observers witnessed horizons bending inward, as if the edges of the Earth were being folded to fit inside a shrinking memory boundary. Matter was losing its anchor in space-time. The universe was no longer trying to look real. It was aggressively lowering its graphics settings to survive the final crash. As the simulation's core processing units began to overheat and fail, the fundamental dimension of time itself began to stutter. The chronological engine, responsible for maintaining linear causality, entered a severe latency state. Across the globe, reality began to experience catastrophic processing lag.
For many, an ordinary moment would suddenly begin to loop indefinitely. A man dropping his keys would watch them fall, strike the ground, and then reset back to his hand, repeating the action hundreds of times per second until localized RAM was purged.
Elsewhere, time simply desynchronized. Observers in subterranean bunkers watched their colleagues move in slow motion, while their own thoughts raced at normal speeds. Objects became stuck in single, frozen frame rates, suspended perfectly in midair, like static museum exhibits.
History itself began to repeat in microbursts. The same conversation, the same car crash, the same bird song, looping over and over until the sector entirely crashed into void. The universe was no longer flowing, it was lagging, desperate for processing power it would never receive.
As the wipe protocol reached its final optimization phase, the system targeted the most complex, memory-intensive assets in the simulation: organic life. Biological matter did not rot or decay. It simply lost its rendering resolution. Across urban centers and rural farmlands alike, living organisms began to de-res. Millions watched in mute horror as their own hands turned translucent, exposing glowing blue wireframes and the dark void beneath. Animals paused mid-stride, their physical forms fragmenting into floating cascades of cyan voxels before dissolving into thin air. There was no physical pain, only a terrifying, weightless detachment as human consciousness lost its anchor in space-time. Loved ones held on to each other, only for their fingers to pass through one another like ghost code. People weren't dying in a biological sense. They were being uninstantiated. Entire populations vanished from crowded streets in fractions of a second, leaving behind silent, empty cities that were themselves rapidly collapsing into featureless gray blocks. In the end, there were no dramatic explosions, no fiery cosmic catastrophes, and no last-minute salvation. The universe did not end with a bang. It simply reached 100% memory allocation and executed a clean system wipe. As the last star flickered out and space-time collapsed into a zero-dimensional point, 8 billion human lives, tens of thousands of years of recorded history, and every emotion ever felt were completely purged from the system buffer to free up system memory. To whatever entity designed this engine, humanity was never a special creation. We were merely an unoptimized background process that consumed too much RAM.
The screen goes black. The memory is clear. The system prepares to render a brand new, clean iteration of the universe. System shutdown complete. Initializing Big Bang 2.0.